Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, uh, Leaders in Engineering a Fire Safe World, SFPE's Global Presence in Latin America. I'm Luis Garazzi, SFPE's Director of Professional Development, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. First, please note you are able to listen to this presentation in either English or Spanish. To do so, you can select the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. Additionally, you are able to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A function, which you can also find at the bottom of your screen in the webinar dashboard. Uh, Please note that SFP does not provide copies of the speaker's PowerPoint presentation. However, you can access the recording of this webinar later using the Zoom registration link provided to you. Again, the same Zoom link used today to access today's webinar, I will be able to provide access to the recording. Today's speakers are Nicole Boston, Chris Chelenowitz, Victoria Valentine, and myself. Nicole Boston is SFP CEO and has been serving since 2013, and she's responsible for overseeing all of the Society's wide-ranging activities and expanding on strategic initiatives, including our technical and educational programs, overseeing finance, advocacy, and all operations for staff. Nicole also serves as an officer on SFP's board of directors, as well as our research foundation, SFP Foundation. Chris Chelenowitz is our technical director, and he's responsible for overseeing all of SFP's technical activities, including serving as editor-in-chief of the 6th edition for the SFP Handbook of Fire Protection Engineering, technical editor of the Fire Protection Engineering magazine, and overseeing development of SFPE's engineering guides and standards. Victoria Valentine is our Director of Professional Qualifications and is responsible for overseeing fire protection engineering core competencies, liaison with our higher education institutes, and also is involved with providing development guidance for the Fire Protection Professional Engineering exam. And I'm Luis Garazzi. I'm the Director of Professional Development, and I oversee all of the professional development and education programs here at SFP, including our seminars, webinars, conferences, and networking opportunities. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Nicole Boston.
Thank you, Louis. And there we go. There's our slide. Those of us who are joining you today, I wanted to say hola and thank you so much for taking the time to come and hear, back one slide, guys, and hear about SFPE. So we are going to run through some slides, as Louis has already said, and we will make the recording available so that you can go back and share this with others. But to start off, I wanted to explain that the Society of Fire Protection Engineers is a member-based organization. So individuals join the organization who really want to achieve and work together on what is shown here as SFPE's mission. Our purpose is to define, develop, and advance the use of engineering best practices, to expand the scientific and technical knowledge base around fire protection engineering, and to educate the global fire safety community to reduce fire risk. We believe we are the leaders focused on engineering. There are many organizations working in fire protection, certainly around the globe. And our area that we really hone in and focus on is the engineering aspects to reduce fires. Next slide, please. We're governed by a board of directors. We have 14 members of our board, 5 officers that include our president, president-elect, secretary, treasurer, immediate past president, and myself. And then we have 9 directors. We really encourage our members to participate in leadership, to participate in our committees, which you're going to be hearing about a little later on in the presentation, as well as our board. We've made a very intentional practice the last 5 or 6 years to get global representation. We have several individuals from Europe participating on our board, a Canadian, and we'd love to see someone from Latin America. Next slide, please. Many of you are probably familiar with NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. And as I just described, they're an organization very focused on fire protection and creating codes and standards for the industry. So 1896 is when they were founded. And in around 1950, excuse me, what would that be? 70 years ago, the society was formed within NFPA. At the time, it was a special interest group. So the engineers that were participating in NFPA had their own group within NFPA and continued to do so for another 21 years. In 1970, the SFPE Foundation was formed, and we're going to take a few minutes in our presentation today to talk to you about the foundation, which operates as a subsidiary of SFPE today, but is a separate organization with a separate board of governors and has very similar outreach goals in funding students, funding faculty, and funding research projects around the world. So we want you all to be aware of that and the opportunities there as well. You do not need to be a member. It is open and those monies are available to anyone. So we really want to create some more awareness for all of you on those opportunities. In 1971, 21 years later, SFPE separated from NFPA and was created as its own entity. In 2020, just last year, we formed SFPE Europe. So we now have a legal entity in Brussels, Belgium, where many of our chapters and members participate and are able to work within the European Commission and the European Union on issues related to engineering and fire safety. And that leads us to today, where we have a very strong emphasis. While we were established in the United States, we are seeing over 25% of our membership outside of the United States. Our chapters and our growth has really been significantly outside of the United States, and our focus continues to be there as well. So we are open and wanting and able to serve a global community, and wanted to share our resources with all of you in the hopes that you all might want to be involved as well. Next slide. So who we are and what we do, as you know, fire protection engineers work in many different areas. These are some of the key segments or industries that our members work in. Many are consultants working in design firms or engineering firms, or just fire protection firms. Many work in insurance. Some are in fire service, working in research and labs as well. We have some academics and then our manufacturing community that supports the industry. Any and all are welcome to join. There's no eligibility requirements. It's anyone who's a stakeholder in this industry and is interested in being a part of the community may join SFPE. What SFPE does, working through our members, we create standards and guides. We create technical publications. We provide education and curriculum around different issues related to fire protection engineering. And we host conferences, symposiums, networking opportunities, ways for people in the industry, especially globally, to connect with each other and work on projects or solve challenges that they may be facing. Last slide, we have and operate with a strategic plan. So every 3 years, our board of directors goes through a very lengthy and very robust process of developing the goals for the next 3 years. Last year during the pandemic, our board, had probably 10 or more meetings in total to create a new plan for the next 3 years, which just started this past January. And what they identified and what we wanted to share with you are the 4 goals that we're focused on for the next 3 years that will be driving a lot of our programs and our initiatives. So the first is to represent and advance the interests of professionals who apply engineering principles to the challenges of fire, meaning we want to be an advocate and out there creating promotion and understanding around the role of engineering in fire protection. And frankly, the qualifications needed by the individuals who are doing that. Number 2, we want to foster a professional environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Certainly, many of our members, and historically in a lot of STEM groups, they have historically been largely male. We are working very hard to inform women about the opportunities, the wonderful opportunities in fire protection engineering. We're looking to our middle schoolers and our high schoolers and those in college programs to make them aware of the opportunities in fire protection engineering. There's simply just not enough people and not enough engineers working in fire protection engineering that are qualified. And so a big thrust that we have the next 3 years is to really create more diversity and inclusion in the organization to capture more individuals working in the field. Number 3 is to advance the competency and ethical practice of professionals who apply engineering principles to the challenges of fire. So we have, and you're going to be hearing more about this, created some core competency metrics that we believe all individuals working in the field should be meeting. And we are building new programs around that. And 4th, advancing research and the use of engineering principles to address the challenges of fires. And we do that through the various standards that we create. A lot of folks don't know that SFPE does create standards. We are an ANSI accredited standards organization. We also produce guidelines that we encourage jurisdictions and the industry to use. We create and publish magazines, publications, and other technical documents and tools and resources for the industry. And you'll be hearing much more about that from Chris later in the presentation. So with that, I want to turn it over to Victoria, who's going to talk to you more about our work in advocacy.
Thanks, Nicole. I am going to start with our core competencies, which is one of our major projects that has taken many forms, at least in my tenure here at the Society. We developed these core competencies. It took a few years for everyone to agree on the words that we put on the page. But we have broken the information into 4 major knowledge areas, being fire science, human behavior and evacuation, fire protection systems, and fire protection analysis. And all of those are really the information that's specific to fire protection. So a big portion of this is these are the pieces that are fire protection related. What it does also assume is that everybody has a foundation in general engineering. So your math, your science, physics, a lot of the basics that would apply across many disciplines. And what we see with fire protection is really that it is an interdisciplinary subject where people come from all different branches to start with, but also that there's just many moving parts and many different specialties within the industry in order to perform the job. So the Society went down this road because it really became evident that a lot of this can apply across the board to somebody practicing anywhere in the world. Although we may have different standards, different building criteria, different installation criteria, a lot of the science that goes into how and why and what is really the same. So this is the first time in the industry we really got to put down on paper what somebody needs to know in order to be a qualified professional. Now, the committee is continuing to work on this, and you're going to see more information coming soon. We're going to talk about specific roles that within that industry that people are performing, and specifically which components are basically more important in order to do a specific job. So we'll see that coming soon. Lewis, next slide. Thanks. The roles themselves, you know, varying levels that whether you're an entry level and you're learning, whether you've reached that first step of competency, or whether you have reached a point of mastery, obviously that is as somebody progresses through career. And what we're trying to do is really put together information that can support all of those phases. You can see, and my apologies, it's tiny font, but a lengthy list here of different roles that do apply, from human behavior to special hazards. Within the committee, they're even talking about wildland urban interface. So that point where city meets vast country. But all of it comes down to you know, making sure that the professionals who are putting together fire protection schemes are knowledgeable and qualified to be in that function. Next slide. So another piece of this, as we think about how this all ties together, is university support and making sure that people are educated in order to really learn those different knowledge areas. And with that, we are involved at a varying degree of levels. There is model curricula available. So we do have a bachelor's level model curricula for fire protection engineering, as well as engineering technology. And then there's also a master's level, which could be a master's of science or a master's of engineering, also for fire protection engineering, and they're all available online. So we do get that inquiry often, that people are looking to pursue actually putting in a certificate program or a degree program within a university to have that focus on fire protection. It is a growing field. Right now, there's probably about 40 programs worldwide that we're aware of. It doesn't mean that there aren't a few more out there that haven't made it to our doorstep yet. But hopefully we see an increase, because as Nicole mentioned, we always need more fire protection engineers, and it's not going to just happen overnight. We need to make sure that everybody's educated. One of the things we do focus on, we have a higher education committee, and we look at accreditation. And here it talks about ABET, which is the main organization here in the US that accredits programs, but they do also have an international reach, not just themselves, although they will accredit international programs, but through a lot of partnerships around the world and different agreements that are in place in order to make sure that the education is also up to par, that it does meet the qualifications that we're looking for in a solid program. Next. Public policy is another avenue that we look at. We had just worked through a new position statement, or an updated position statement for the society, talking about the role of the engineer and the engineering technician. This is a clear definition in the United States. You do see people working in both of these levels around the world, but it's not always it's not always as distinct depending on where you are geographically. But it is a new position. It talks a lot about what tasks and functions would be expected of both the engineer or engineering technician when they're both present on a job. Public policy, you know, their big project right now is actually pulling together all of the resources they can to help advocate for fire protection engineering. And that advocacy has two levels. One is an awareness of fire protection engineering for the general public, for recruiting people who may want to work in the field in the future, whether it's students looking at university programs or professionals looking for a new avenue. But they're also, on the other side of that, advocating to make sure that fire protection engineers are the ones doing the work, and making sure that if fire protection is involved in a project, that the people who are performing that work are qualified. Next. So we also tie some of these groups, we have some overlap amongst the groups, but we work to help people go into that recruiting mode and explain what a fire protection engineer is, as well as interest them in why you might want to become one. So there's a few different programs out there. We do a publication that's available electronically on the website, the Careers in Fire Protection Engineering. There's also for like high school level chemistry programs that help just to interest students about fire and how to be safe with fire. And then there's also a short program for our members and chapters carry it forward and do some local grassroots efforts in their communities, just explaining what a fire protection engineer is and possible future options. So those resources are there. Of course, we're always working to improve and renew. So our career website is actually growing and expanding. So we'll see some great changes with that as we move across 2021, but always a point of need for us. Next slide. The Career Center. So now let's say you're educated and you've reached that qualified point. You know, we've got a job board that helps our members find new positions and our employer companies find new help. So you can see some simple statistics there about our job postings, but it is a great resource for finding people in fire protection. Next slide. Also, as a member of SFPE, for our consultants who work in that profession, we do have a Find an FPE program where people can search geographically or on a handful of qualifications filter options that are available, but our members register within the program, and then everybody can go and search them. So also another tool that's available. And with that, we're going to move to talking about our inclusiveness, and that brings us back to Nicole.
Thank you, Vicki. Next slide. So our inclusive environment is another way of talking about our membership and our community and our connectedness. So we have currently about 4,800 members worldwide. Our members pay dues based on their country. So it's different amounts depending upon where you're coming from. And our students are free. So we really understand and know that the future of this profession and the future of this industry rests with those who are in school now and who will be coming up. And we really want to encourage their participation right away when they're in school. So if you didn't know that already, or if you know somebody who's in school and interested in a profession, there's absolutely no cost to participate with us while you're going to school. As I mentioned in my earlier slides, 27% of our membership is made up of members outside of the United States, and that number keeps growing. And you can see the breakdown there with in the US and outside of the US. Next slide, please. So out of the 195 countries in the world, we have members in 76 countries, and you can see a breakdown here. And hopefully with our attendees and friends here online from Central South America and Mexico, we really want more individuals and more members and more engagement with our friends to the south here. You can see we've had a pretty big growth in Europe, in Canada, Australia and New Zealand. We have a few hundred members, Asia, the Middle East, and we're really looking again in the future to create partnerships and a strong value proposition so that we can increase and provide the resources and tools that will serve and benefit the Latin American community. Next slide, please. Number of women, as I talked about earlier, I mean, women, you know, are more than 50% of the population. They're also a higher percentage of STEM and graduate degrees are going to women today than men. And so while we recognize that there are not enough, we want to make sure that we are looking to women as well to help fill that gap. So these two graphs, what they show here on the left is for our membership, we only have 10% of our membership female. However, if you look at our students, it's almost 25%. So what we're seeing is more and more women going into the field, going into engineering, going into STEM fields, and we want to work with those women to make sure that when they enter the field, that they are in an inclusive and welcoming environment, and that there are good culture fits for all. So we see this as a really good sign that the industry is being more open in getting more females into the field. Next slide, please. We also look at generational breakdown. So one of our concerns, and a concern of a lot of membership organizations, is, you know, will the new folks come, and what happens as our members who have been around for decades start retiring? And so a few years ago, we started collecting data to see what the age demographic was for our members. And as you can see here, you know, it's pretty well distributed. These are the years that they were born. So as one might expect, those in the 2000s are just coming up. But the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and the 50s, a pretty good distribution. So that's something as an organization we're really working hard on and diligently to make sure that there is a pipeline of engineers to sustain and maintain the industry. Next slide. Chapter growth. So we have 108 chapters in addition to our membership. Many of our chapter members, so the individuals participating in their chapters, are not necessarily members of SFPE. We're working to change that. We would obviously like everyone to be a part of SFPE, but the reality is a lot of folks to date have wanted and had a stronger need to be connected to their local community and their local resources. And so you can see here the growth over the last few years, and really a pretty big explosion the last 5 years, and a lot of that international. We do have one Latin American chapter in Mexico, and that came on board in 2018. We would very much like to work with all of you to create chapters to provide those local resources to your communities. So we see a lot of our chapters working on public policy issues or code issues in their localities or their regions. They work, you know, with their manufacturers in their communities. A lot of them may have lunch meetings or dinner meetings with speakers, and, you know, provide an opportunity for the community to get together, meet the manufacturers in that area. We at SFPE will help with securing speakers and securing programs for that. A lot of them also look out and work with their universities in attracting students. Some are giving out scholarships and doing some fundraising to help their universities and their students and their researchers. So there's a wide range of different things, and no chapter is the same. Some do a lot, some do a little, and that's okay too. But we are here as a resource to help you form them, get them started, and create that community at your country or city level. Next slide. We've created some special interest groups, especially in the last year, as most of the world has been stuck at home, and mobility and travel hasn't been what it is. We've created these online communities to put, you know, people with similar interests together for lunches, for speakers, for conversation circles that we'll have, panel discussions that we'll have. So we have one right now for women in fire protection engineering, which is a place for them to come together and talk about issues that matter to them. And FM Global, we're very grateful to have as a sponsor of that program. Emerging professionals is, I think, 35 and under for the most part, although, you know, we certainly welcome anyone in these. but it's a place for those coming into the profession and, you know, moving into leadership positions to come together and discuss their issues. We have another for the fire service. So a lot of our members either come from the fire service or are still volunteering in some capacity. And certainly in recent years with the wild urban interface and the forest fires that we've seen, we have members who are very interested in those aspects and in those areas. And so that's a group for them to meet and discuss the challenges that they're seeing and looking for solutions. And then we have another group of students because they have different and unique needs and create opportunities for them to learn more about employers and courses, different career paths and opportunities and things like that. It's very easy for us to set up new special interest groups. And like I said, we've just really started doing this in earnest a year ago. But we do that through creating an online community, creating, like I said, lunch and learns and different ways for groups to connect. So as members identify new areas that they would like to connect with others in the space, we will happily accommodate that. Next slide, please. We do have a corporate 100 partner program. So we have 56 companies who help support the organization based on the dollars that they provide and gift. They're broken out between visionaries, benefactors, patrons, and sustainers. These are usually organizations that are really embedded in the fire protection engineering community and realize the important role that the society plays in sustaining and maintaining that profession. And we are very grateful because their donations and their monies help to create so many of the programs that we are able to deliver at no cost or low cost. Next slide. I think this is my last slide. Standing committees. We have 4. We've actually sunset one of these committees. The Outreach and Advocacy Committee has rolled under membership and chapters. So we have 4 committees. Research, Tools, and Methods, which Chris Jelenowitz leads, and a lot of what you'll hear from him, the programs and the activities fall under that group. As you can see, it's our most popular group. We are engineers who want to do engineering work. And so if you're interested in participating, please contact Chris. Our professional qualifications group is led by Victoria, and the things that you heard her present on around higher education, competencies, qualifications, ethics, advocacy, brand awareness around fire protection engineering, all of that, and the programs are worked on in that committee under we call CPQ, Committee on Professional Qualifications. Professional development, you haven't heard from yet, but Louis Garazi is our staff liaison for that group. They are the group that handles all of our conferences, our webinars, our symposiums, our seminars, our courses, all of the technical kind of education that we put out into the world. And then our membership and chapters group does our special interest groups, our chapters, our corporate 100, our awards programs, and some of the things that I've just covered with you today. So, last slide. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this has really come to the forefront in the last few years as we've seen our frankly new fire protection engineers coming into the field and frankly the world changing. So we and the board of directors have put out a diversity policy. We believe it's very important as a global organization working with people all across the globe with different languages, different ages, different cultural norms and the like, to really bring awareness to the differences, but how those differences can unite us. So we certainly focus and do our best to focus on, you know, a very positive civil discourse within our committees, within our networking, and want to ensure that when people come to us and get involved with us, that their experiences are rewarding, that they are a positive experience, and that it's a place that they want to make as their professional home. And so with that, I think we're going to turn this over to Lewis, who's going to talk a little bit about what's happening in professional practice.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so I will talk about what we at SFP are doing with some of our education. And I guess I will start off by saying, as we've seen today, we have a wide membership all over the globe. And we see, especially in regions where NFPA has reached out to outside of the US, we see this largely in the Middle East, that we have a number of individuals in those regions that reach out to us once they've been brought up to date on the codes, the standards, kind of understand how systems work. And then they look towards us to kind of for that next step. So we go beyond the codes, and we definitely bring the engineering aspects and technical expertise to you all through these professional development programs we have on the screen. So what we're looking at right now is a list of some of the existing courses that we offer, either in person or online. All of these are currently being administered online when we do hold them. But these are programs that we will either do an open registration for. So we'll place them either in person or online and market it out to the general public and our membership to solicit interest and attendees. But we also do provide contract courses, is what we call them. And we'll work with organizations and companies to bring in-house education and potentially tailor that education to the needs of that organization. So these are, again, just a list of the ones we have existing. We are currently working on expanding upon this list with some other topics, but also expanding on maybe some of the topics we see here. So I'll make a comment, I guess, on fire risk assessment, as well as our performance-based design. These are two areas that you'll hear from Chris in a bit, that we're publishing updated guides and standards on, and with that, we'll be looking to expand upon the education for those areas. I do have here a list of upcoming live online seminars that we offer. These are all available online. We have a design strategies for very tall buildings coming up shortly, and then the rest of this list here. Right now, all of these courses are administered in English, but we will be evaluating moving forward, creating some opportunities in Spanish as well. Not all of these, but we will be looking to expand upon our reach and bringing some more content to Spanish. Right now, we offer 3 different series of webinars. The first being our Member Monday series. We've been offering webinars for a number of years, which have been free to members. And last year, we branded this series as Member Monday webinar. They're typically offered on on Mondays, but they are included in membership with SFPE, and we do a minimum of we say we do a minimum of 12, but really we do a minimum of closer to 24 a year, and these are free to members. We also offer a perspective series, and these are webinars that are provided through some of our partnered organizations, some of our Corporate 100 sponsors as well, where we have industry partners come together and sponsor a webinar where they'll share technical knowledge on a specific topic that usually includes a solution or product that they are involved with. And then last is our newest webinar series, and that is our premium webinar series. This is a specially curated program that extends over typically 4 to 6 sessions around a single topic, and then is ended with a panel discussion, which we call our Power Hour discussion with all of the speakers. We currently now have a modern storage consideration premium webinar series, which started last week, and which will be ending in a couple of weeks, and you can find more information on our website about that as well. We now administer a lot and all of our content through an e-learning portal. On our left-hand side here, you'll see some of our archived webinars, which we provide on demand to members and to non-members, where you can select the topic and you will be provided your professional development hour or continuing education unit for watching that, that webinar. On the right-hand slide, we have a little screenshot of just some of our online content and online seminars, where we have an advanced fire dynamics simulator course going on right now. And you'll see in the screenshot, we also provide all of the recordings, presentation, links, and additional course content right there for you. So beyond our seminars and webinars, we also do have a number of standing conferences we hold. The next upcoming conference is being held March 24th and 25th, and that's our Europe Fire Safety Conference. Unfortunately, we won't be able to be meeting in person this year. We were supposed to be in Berlin, but with everything going on, this is going to be a virtual conference. And you can find more information about this conference on our website at sfp.org/Europe21, where you'll see the conference program. We have a number of technical tracks that range from parking garage structures to fire protection systems, and have a few great general session speakers there. This is the conference that we hold biannually. So the last time we held this conference was in 2019 in Malaga, Spain, and then we'll hold it again this year. Our biggest event of the year is our annual conference and expo. This is a conference we hold every year, and it's typically in North America. And we are planning on being in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, October 3rd to the 5th. This is a conference, like I said, we hold every year. We see about 450 attendees from all over the world, largely from North America. And we are continuing to see growth from international attendees at this event, as we are really looking for it to be our crowning event and bringing together our wide membership. We have a large expo that's associated with this conference, where we have approximately 70 vendors and companies come together to share their information on their solutions and products in the fire protection industry. Our next standing conference is our International Performance-Based Design Conference. And this is also a conference we hold every other year. It's been going on since, I want to say, the mid-90s or so. And we'll be meeting in Copenhagen, Denmark next year. The dates at the bottom of the screen. Conference will be March 23rd and to 25. And this conference really does focus on performance-based design approaches and probabilistic deterministic risk approaches, and is definitely a fantastic event. We have a special case study segment to this conference where we invite groups from around the world to share their approach and design solutions to specific set of designs or building specs. And this conference is a great opportunity to see the differing codes and approaches that our membership takes to approaching a single building or design. So beyond our conferences, which are standing at that annual or biannual interval, SFP is also looking to expand and start delivering some engineering solutions symposiums around focused areas of fire protection engineering. The first one we had planned, unfortunately, was in Rome last June, and we were not able to be there because of COVID. And we are looking to reschedule that event later this year. So we'll see where that ends up. But it was around protecting cultural and heritage sites. And this was kind of a response to the fire we had in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in France back in 2019. The next engineering solution symposium that we are in the process of building is around WUI and the wildfire issue. This is a program that we'll be looking to pull together and deliver later this year, early in 2022. And right now our tentative dates are in California. And with that, I think I'll hand it over to Chris.
All right, thank you, Lewis. Can everybody hear me out there? Anybody good? Well, welcome to the final session, and we're going to talk about how SFPE is the leader in developing technical content for our profession. You could go to the next slide, Lewis, please. And I think the first way, and probably one of the more notable ways we provide content for our profession, is through our flagship magazine, Fire Protection Engineering Magazine. This magazine is published quarterly, and it is free to people who are members of the society. I believe it's one of our society's best benefits, and when we ask our members what are the biggest benefits, they usually tell us this is one of them. And what we try to do with FPE magazine is to produce content that is really applicable to the practicing fire protection engineer. This is really not a technical journal, but a way to provide engineers with assistance on projects that they're working on every day. And what we try to do is pick some of the more emerging topics in our field. So what you'll see in some coming editions is we're going to have a dedication issue to the 9/11 event and terrorist attacks and how that's changed fire protection engineering. We're also going to have a coming up issue related to cultural heritage. So we try to look at some of the emerging topics like that. Next slide, please. We also produce SFPE's technical journal, Fire Technology, what is a collaboration between SFPE and NFPA. And this technical journal is, the leadership is by Guillermo Rain, who is the editor-in-chief. He's out of London Imperial College. The journal is published by our publishing partner, Springer. And this is another benefit. So every member of SFPE not only gets access to the current editions of Fire Technology, but of all the previous editions by digital format by going online to the SFPE website. Next slide, please. And then we also offer a few digital publications. One of them is SFPE Europe, which is a digital magazine that kind of looks at some of the emerging and hot topics that are in Europe right now. We also have the SFPE News Update, which is published once a month, that provides our members with all the important things that are going on at SFPE. and some of the big news that's coming out of the society. And then finally, we have a digital only magazine called FPE Extra, and that's issued once a month, and that's available not only to all our members, but to really anybody who's interested. And with FPE Extra, we try to publish interesting articles about the practice of fire protection engineering. Next slide, please, Lewis. And I would say probably one of our most important documents we publish is the SFPE Handbook of Fire Protection Engineering. It is now in its 5th edition. The first edition was published in the 1980s, where Phil Danino and a few of our members were sitting around a bar one day and said, hey, you know, our profession is really growing. We have a lot of good research and practical knowledge out there. Let's put this in a handbook. It's now time that we have a handbook. Now we're in our 5th edition. It's grown so much that it's in 3 volumes. It is the first time that we ever published this edition in electronic format. And we could say that the handbook has had over 1 million downloads. So we're really seeing this to be a very popular handbook that's grown throughout the whole world. We see people downloading it in all parts of the world. And we're currently working on the 6th edition of this handbook, which we hope to publish in 2023, once again through our publishing partner, Springer. And you could go to the next slide, Lois, please. And we have a lot of new information. So not only do we have all the great current information in the 5th edition, we're adding a lot of great new information to the 6th edition. For example, we're going to have a dedicated section on fire testing and another dedicated section on wildland urban interface fires. So it's very exciting to see that we'll have 2 new sections on 2 interesting topics. Also, we're going to make significant changes to the structural section of the handbook. And specifically, we're going to focus more on the performance-based structural approach to a structural fire protection engineering problem. We will also keep the existing prescriptive type information, but then add guidance on how to do this performance-based approach. The handbook is also going to have a user guide. So for people who are using the handbook, to provide some type of guidance on how you use this or how you could use this handbook every day as you're designing a project. And finally, it's going to also have an introduction to fire safety engineering, which was never in the handbook before. We're also going to have new chapters on passive fire protection, fire investigations, flame extinction by active suppression, lithium-ion batteries and energy storage, which is a really emergent topic right now, refrigerants, and then also a new chapter on oxygen reduction systems. So we're very excited to see those new chapters. And then we're also going to make significant changes to the data that is in the appendices of the SFPE handbook. So we're working with the folks out there at NIST, and they have a team actually that's contributing and working with our intern, Steve Dunn, to look at all the data that's provided into these appendices to make sure it's the most current and applicable data to be used by fire protection engineers. And then finally, we're going to try to do a better job in using common terminology between chapters. So we're very excited about this, and we'll see that come out in 2023. And you could go to the next slide, Lewis. In addition to the magazine and our journal and our handbook, we also publish engineering guidance documents and engineering standards. One of them, the Engineering Guide to Human Behavior and Fire, is in its second edition. It was published in 2019, and it is also available in an electronic or print format. And if anybody heard Erica Kolagowski's presentation on human behavior and fire at the last SFPE conference, she did a really good job of showing how the topic of human behavior and fire has really grown in our profession. And the one thing I got from her presentation is a lot of the things that she talked about and a lot of the technical content that we're using to assist in this area of our profession that's growing so much is stuff that's published by SFPE. And the new guide for human behavior and fire has a lot of new content. So for example, we have new content relating to toxicity analysis, which was not present in the first edition. We have content related to occupant behavior scenarios, specifically looking at scenarios for performance-based design and estimating how we understand occupants will behave during a fire emergency. We also have a lot of good information about computer models. You know, there's about 40 different human behavior type models out there. So when a fire protection engineer has to use one, you know, what is the right model to use and how do we apply that to the problem that we're looking at? So we provide a lot of good specific information on how to select these models, how we ensure these models are validated and verified. And we're talking about validation. We're talking about, you know, how do we assure that the model is using the correct the correct equations, or is the physics correct in the model, and then going into verification and are we doing the math correctly. The new human behavior guide also talks about estimating of uncertainty and, you know, gives guidance to engineers on how, if we really deal with uncertainty properly in our design, that we could rely less on safety factors. And then finally, we have chapters on notification, emergency notification, with some of the latest information on, you know, how do we alert occupants during an emergency, and how do we ensure that the occupants are receiving the correct messages. You could go to the next slide there, please, Lewis. And last year, we published our guidelines for peer review in the fire protection design process. This is a guide that's offered free from SFPE. So if you're interested in downloading this, you could go to our website, www.sfpe.org, or you could go to the URL at the bottom of the page. But basically what this guide does is provide a process of how a peer review should be done properly. And a new edition of this guide provides a new listing of definitions related to peer review. It provides more defined description of the qualifications that are in line with the SFPE recommended minimum technical core competencies that Victoria talked about in the first part of this presentation. It also provides information that links the SFPE Code of Ethics for Fire Protection Engineers to the peer review process. And we also have added details on the important components of the peer review, and also a good broad discussion on the limitations of the document. You could go to the next slide, please. Also, SFP recently published the 3rd edition of the book, Sprinkler Hydraulics and What It's All About, that was originally written by Harold S. Wass. It's been known for ages as the most important book when it comes to doing sprinkler calculations. I know I even used it when I was a student at the university back in the 1980s. It was updated by Russ Fleming, who was not only a past president of the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, but he's the former president of the National Fire Sprinkler Association. So if you'd like to see that book, you could go to our publishing partner Springer, or to the URL that you see on the slide here. Okay, Lewis, you could go to the next slide. And when we saw the slide that I believe Nicole showed, that showed all the committees, here are some of the things that the Research Tools and Methods Committee is working on. We're working on revising our guide to fire risk assessment. We see that being published probably in the next 3 to 4 months, once again through our publishing partner Springer. And this revised guide will have a lot of new information on, how to conduct a fire risk assessment that will include a totally new model to be in line with how risk assessment is being conducted throughout the world. And it's also going to have a lot more practical examples of how risk assessments are performed. Also, in the next 2 months, we'll be publishing our SFPE Guide to Fire Safety for Very Tall Buildings. And this guide will have a lot of new information specifically on facades or the building envelope. Of course, throughout the world, we've been seeing many fires in very tall buildings, and these flammable facades are a big contributor in many of these fires. We're also having an updated section on structural fire engineering to really show the necessity of having a performance-based approach to structural fire engineering when we're designing a very tall building. There's also going to be information about lithium-ion batteries and energy storage. We're starting to see tall buildings, almost dedicating entire floors to energy storage. So what does the fire protection engineer do when they're faced with that problem, and how do we properly design for that type of a hazard? There will also be information on existing tall buildings and new information about some of the interesting things that we might see in very tall buildings that we might not see in others. For example, how do you deal with fireworks if you wanted to have a fireworks show from the top of your very tall building? Or what if you wanted to have an amusement ride at the top of your building, like a roller coaster, or a very large swimming pool that had a very large assembly? So we're looking at these kind of interesting issues that really make the design challenging for a fire protection engineer. We're also working on revising our fire scenario standard, which will be not our, but it will be a new standard on fire scenarios that will discuss how we provide these qualitative fire scenarios for performance-based design. We're working on our standard on calculating fire exposures to structures, which is our first standard. And basically in this standard, we're looking at the first part of a structural analysis where we're really determining the design fire that we'll use in our structural analysis. There's going to be some very big significant changes to this standard where we're going to be going from how to provide a deterministic analysis to a totally probabilistic analysis. And I could say our committee is really facing a heavy challenge on how to switch over from looking at a deterministic design fire to a probabilistic one. We also have a committee that's writing a new standard on performance-based design. Originally, SFPE had performance-based design as a guidance document. It is now going to be a standard. We now feel that our profession is at the time where we really need a standard as opposed to a guidance document. So something else to look forward to, hopefully in the year 2022. We're also looking at revising our thermal response standard, which is the second part of our structural fire protection engineering standards. And this standard focuses on how we analyze the heat transfer in an assembly that we're looking at that's part of a structural analysis. And then we also have a design fire standard coming out and a update to our computer model guide. And we're working on a new guidance document on existing buildings to provide some guidance for fire protection engineers who are asked to do an assessment of an existing building. We're hopefully going to kick off the first meeting of the task group that's looking at that sometime in the next month or so. And I also mentioned how the SFPE handbook will be published in 2023. So you could go to the next slide, please, Lewis. Another area we work at with our research tools and methods committee is as we develop this technical content, whether it be a standard, a guide, or even our handbook, you know, how do we get this type of information into the model building codes and standards? So we have a few working groups that are looking at, you know, ways to get these standards adopted. And specifically, we have a working group that works with NFPA standards. Currently, SFPE documents are referenced over 400 times in NFPA documents. So what our committee does there is, one, trying to maintain these references in the existing NFPA documents, but also trying to find new ways to get these SFPE documents referenced. And specifically, we're looking at areas related to things like performance-based design, risk assessment methodologies, or any other methodology where the fire protection engineer would be required to do this type of work. We also have a working group that's looked at the ICC code, specifically the International Building Code. In the latest edition of the IBC, as a result of our working group, we have a new Appendix O in the IBC on performance-based design. which provides a lot of good information linking to other SFP guidance documents on performance-based design. We're also working with the folks at IBC to assist them in developing some of the commentary that's in the IBC commentary. So in the current edition, the commentary on smoke control was assisted with our working group. Moving forward into the next editions, we're going to be looking in other areas that some of our membership could assist in this commentary. And we're also working on developing a new working group to look at references in some of the European codes. And then finally, SFPE is represented on ISO Technical Committee 92, Technical Committee 92, Subcommittee 4, which is the subcommittee related to fire protection engineering. So a lot of our work with ISO is really, once again, to make sure not only that SFP standards are referenced into these documents, but that the ISO and the SFPE standards can be used together as opposed to having them conflict each other. Go next slide, Lewis, please. Our Research Tools and Methods Committee also developed a research roadmap. You can learn more about this on our website, but specifically what we're doing with this roadmap is trying to define areas that we need research in that are related to fire protection engineering. So it's definitely a different roadmap as opposed to what you would see by the NFPA or similar organizations which outline a roadmap for fire safety. This roadmap specifically looks at the data, the tools, and the engineering approaches that are needed by fire protection engineers. And that research roadmap has 9 specific areas: human behavior, building fires, sustainability, fire service, fire dynamics, fire safety system, investigations, wildland, urban interface fires, and non-building fires. Next slide, please, Lewis. And our aim here is to work with the SFPE Foundation, so when the SFPE Foundation funds their research, that it is really aimed at supporting this roadmap, or specifically aimed at providing the research that is needed by those practicing in our profession. And the foundation started out and has a few successful projects that have linked back to our roadmap. Once again, you can find that at the SFPE Foundation website, sfpe.org/foundation. And we're working on a new project now that's looking at the development of fire engineering tools for the practitioner. And what they're doing in this project is looking at all the different models that are used by fire protection engineers, whether they're fire models like FDS and CFAST, whether they're structural models like Abacus, or one of the 40 human behavior models, or even risk assessment models. They're looking at all these models and seeing how fire protection engineers are applying these models in everyday fire protection engineering projects. So we should see this come out soon, and we're very excited to see that project coming down the line. Next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. Make sure to follow us on social media, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Um, Austin at our office is really doing a great job of, expanding our presence on social media. I think it's one of our big success stories over the last couple years. And we really see that it's really providing a lot of excitement about SFPE to social media. So I encourage you, not only the things I talked about our website, but to engage in these social media websites. And that's the last slide, Lewis, I think. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Yeah, Chris. So thank you for rounding out the last session there on the technical content. I think we do now have a chance to take questions from the attendees. Our interpreter will, if you put it into the Q&A item at the bottom of the webinar, our interpreter will then read the questions to us, and we can respond right back to you. In the meantime, I did get one question come through while you guys are taking time to put in any questions, asking about more information on human behavior resources. So Chris, I'll go first, and then I'll hand it over to you to see if you have could expand upon it. But I know we do have a webinar coming out soon. I don't have the date in front of me, but you could go to our website, and I'm sure we'll follow up with this webinar with some more information around upcoming events. And then we also will be having a course, an online seminar later this year. I think it's going to be held in August, so I don't know if we have the date up just yet. We do have a course scheduled for later this year on human behavior. Chris, do you want to add on?
Yeah, Lewis. Like I said in my presentation, I really think this is an area that SFPE is a leader in our profession. There's so much content out there we develop. First, in the SFPE Handbook of Fire Protection Engineering, there's 10 chapters, everything from toxicity analysis to basic human behavior fundamentals. And we just, in the 5th edition, published a new chapter on human behavior data. So if you need any kind of information for analysis, whether it's, how fast could someone move up a stairs, how fast can somebody move down a set of stairs, how much, can a person with disabilities move in different directions. This data is provided for every almost conceivable type of occupancy. Also, our magazine, Fire Protection Engineering magazine, if you look at our archives, we have 3 issues that are dedicated to human behavior, and also many more articles on the topic of human behavior in fire. And of course, at our conferences, we usually set aside a lot of good sections on human behavior and fire. And then finally, our guide to human behavior to fire that I already discussed in the Q&A section. Without a doubt, we say we're the leaders of the fire safety world. Well, this is one area we're definitely doing that.
Great, yeah, and I was going to add on there about the conference as well. We always have a strong section at all of our conferences around human behavior, so that's great. I do have another question that came in, and it was just asking about if we have any other products that are already being translated into Spanish. And I think, Chris, you touched on it, but we do have our SFPE Extra, which is also currently being published and offered in Spanish, which is a digital publication, which is offered to anyone who wants to receive it. And then we will be working with Engine Zone in the future to bring translated webinars, as well as identifying opportunities for other products of ours to be translated in Spanish in the near future.
And you could find, and to add on what Lewis said, you could find the archived issues of the Spanish translation of the digital magazine on our website also. So not only do you get the current, you can see the current ones, all the back issues, which is a tremendous resource, I would say.
And I would add to that, those are free, right? Those are on our website. Anybody can go in and read them and download them, or sign up to be on the distribution mailing list for future pieces.
Great. I think we have one. Yes. Yep, I can hear you, Luis. Thank you. I guess I would defer this to Nicole. So I know we have the Mexico chapter, in Central America, in North America, but I'm not aware of any other efforts right now in South America.
No, we had talked about Colombia. We had talked about Peru. We've participated in some of the conferences and events over the past few years, but we just haven't been able to get enough interest to take it to the next level. So I think that's another thing we're looking at. If there's interest, by all means, reach out to us and talk to us. We would be happy to help. And that may be something else that Engine Zone could help in facilitating for us in the region.
Great. All right, any other questions right now? We do have a few more minutes.
Do you want to just repeat, maybe, Lewis, how people can get a copy of the recording for folks who might have joined after we had started?
Sorry, Nicole, your volume kind of dropped there halfway through. I had a hard time.
I was just going to say, could you just repeat how folks can access the recording?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So just a reminder at the beginning of the presentation, we will be providing a webinar. The Zoom webinar link that you were provided does provide access to the recording. So that'll be sent out through the Zoom link that you've already received, and we'll make sure that everyone has that as well. Luis, you were saying that there is another question that's coming in? Great question. Would you tackle that one?
If Nicole, you could add to this too, but if you go to our website, the foundation website, you could see information on how to submit for a research grant from our foundation. Additionally, the Research Foundation does have focused grants on specific topics that we're looking for. So I would look for those announcements, and definitely if it's an area that you believe that you're interested in doing research on, apply to those grant opportunities also, because there are a lot of opportunities there.
And I'll add, we accept student research grants in the amount of $5,000 US. Those applications are reviewed twice a year. And I think June 1st is the cutoff date. I think it's June 1st and December 31st, but the dates are on the website. And we're setting up new processes on how to accept requests for research dollars that are not tied to specific proposals. So The Board of Governors is working on that, and I would expect in the next month or two there will be more details on the website with instructions on how to apply for discretionary research dollars from the foundation. So for right now, it's through the grant proposals that the foundation puts out, and it's through the student research grants. And then we also have 5 or 6 awards that we give each year that have monetary amounts attached to them.
Great. Thanks, Nicole and Chris. I do see a few other. Yep. Yes.
It says, I think it was Chris mentioned several new committees were coming. One of them was cultural. Can you discuss further? Was that cultural and heritage sites?
Yeah, I don't know if Chris mentioned anything on cultural. I did mention that we do have an upcoming symposium, and I guess I can speak to those again. So these symposiums are intended to be kind of focused events, kind of smaller conferences around specific topics, where we get a much more intimate group that are interested in that topic, whether it's wildfires or cultural heritage sites or healthcare facilities, and just focus on that topic. So we do have a cultural and heritage site symposium that was actually planned to be held last year, but it's been postponed, and we still don't have a firm date on that yet, but we're hoping to be together in person by the end of this year, and we continue to evaluate how we're going to approach in-person events, as we get through this pandemic together. I don't know, Chris, if there was anything you mentioned otherwise about cultural.
No, we do have a committee openings right now for our existing building assessments task group. And so if you're looking into getting involved with our guides or our standards, that is the one right now where we're looking for members. If you're looking to get involved with engineering guides and standards. And information there you can find on our website too, please.
Great question. So there is no Latin American chapter. Am I coming in? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So we don't have a Latin American chapter. The only chapter we do have is actually in Mexico. So we do have an SFPE Mexico chapter, and that is, I believe, and Vicky or Nicole could probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe Victor. What's Victor's last name?
Espinola.
Victor Espinola is our chapter president there, and he's involved with AmRossi, which is an association around fire protection in Mexico. So that is the chapter there. Yep, and we have Maggie putting a link to the Mexico chapter in chat, so we can share that with everyone. Thank you, Maggie. So if you're in Mexico, that would be the best way to get involved with SFPE. Okay, great. I think that was the question back to the Research Foundation. So, and Chris can chime in here, but I believe anything involving modeling, especially evacuation modeling, and of course, anything around healthcare building. I mean, I think those are definitely areas that the Research Foundation is interested in. So, Chris, if you want to maybe comment on that.
I think if you do file a grant proposal with the foundation, it's also important to put down how that is linked to our research roadmap. And, from what I briefly hear from you, that is definitely a topic that is important on our research roadmap. And so when you file that grant proposal, I would definitely say to show how that fits into the roadmap.
Okay, great. So any other questions, Luis, right now? Okay, great. So we are at our time. So just to respect everyone else's time and their commitments, I want to thank you on behalf of staff, and I'll let staff also chime in here to thank you all. We've provided a number of links in the chat. So hopefully those are good resources for you. And we look forward to continuing to reach out to all of you in Latin America and Peru with Engine Zone. And again, to get the recording of this, it is available with the Zoom link that was provided. We'll just make sure that everyone has those links at the end of the session as well. So with that, I guess I would thank everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Gracias.
Gracias a todos. Thank you all.
Thank you.